Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back as always to another video on the channel. It's AnsonX, and today we're asking, when is Deadlock going to release? I think we can make some very informed guesses about the question everybody is asking right now and has been asking for about 8 months now. Podcasts, forums, comment sections, it is always the topic if you're talking Deadlock. And so let's walk through everything that we know, everything we can guess, and try and pin down a realistic window for Deadlock's full release or open beta. What's important is being able to play without being invited and having some type of advertisement by Valve. And so comment your best guess below. I think this could be a cool, almost like time capsule to come back to when the game does release. We can come back and see who had the closest answer. I know I'm going to come back, and so if you're close when it comes to be, I'll let you know. And so we can start looking at Valve's history, not predict exactly what they'll do, but I think there's a pattern here, and they're one of the most successful but unconventional developers, and every project is a bit different. But let's start with the real big kahuna, Counter-Strike 2, which was first teased and the limited test launched in the same month of March 2023. The full release came later that year in September, about 5 months later, which is quick, faster than Deadlock, but it's important to note that CS2 wasn't the foundation of an IP like Deadlock is, and in a lot of ways it was a facelift rather than a whole new game, a facelift to Go. It already had maps, it had an established ecosystem that goes back even further than Go into decades. Valve was iterating on something that they've proven already in multiple games, and they're not building something from scratch like they are here with Deadlock. Dota 2, on the other hand, had a bit of a longer journey. The beta started in 2011, and the game didn't fully release until 2013, and it was over 2 years. But this is before early access, as we know it today, was common, and Dota's model was pretty damn new at the time. It was one of the first really massive free-to-play competitive titles like it. I remember probably a year or so after Dota launched, I paid $15 to get CSGO. And so let's talk about the one that no one wants to, Artifact. It was announced in August of 2017 and launched in November of 2018. And that's about 14 months, but that timeline can be a bit deceptive because Artifact went through multiple internal reboots. It had some pretty rough beta feedback, and by the time that it was launched, it was already fighting against perception issues, which is the exact opposite to Deadlock. Most people know it as either a footnote or as the most public failure of Valve. And you can still download it today, but its legacy is one of a warning. And now to really put the shoe on the other foot, Half-Life Alyx was a hit, and this was announced on November of 2019. November of 2019 works, yeah. And then it released in March of 2020. Just 4 months from the announcement to release, and there was no beta. Valve controlled the rollout real tight and just made a splash with the polished final product, which, again, very similar to CS2. I remember one day they just said on Twitter, CS2, here you go. And so bundle that all up. What does it tell us from most modern Valve games? The pattern is clear. Crystal! Once Valve acknowledges a project publicly, it's usually 4 to 8 months before it goes big, gets released rather. They don't announce early, they announce when they're closing in, and based on Deadlock's development timeline, I'd say we're certainly closing in. And it makes sense, just compare Deadlock to the average live service title right now. It already looks more polished, it has a clear core design, properly innovative, engaging gameplay, like the gameplay of Deadlock is sick. Like, I feel like us in the community, we've kind of gotten lost on that. Like, this game just rules and is so much fun to play. And it's got a development cadence that relatively hasn't slowed down. But Valve, we all know Valve time. There's a reason that it's a coined term. And to understand what might slow that final step, let's go through that Deadlock development timeline that we've been living through. And so when we get down into the roots of Deadlock, it goes even before COVID. It was still a game called Citadel, probably just like the internal working title. But by 2022, Valve had filed some trademarks for the name Neon Prime, and internal testing was underway on some version of the game that we know today. But 2023 is really when things started moving, or at least as we can understand from the outside, and closed playtests really ramped up under that Neon Prime name. The setting was that kind of sci-fi fantasy cross that I'm sure you've seen a lot of other videos on, and there are some really interesting ones as well. But somewhere in this time frame is where Valve made the huge pivot to go into the 1940s arcane fantasy New York and called it Deadlock. And then in May of 2024, the dam really broke. Leaks started pouring out, gameplay footage, screenshots, design breakdowns, and some journalists got their hands on it, and some articles really started being published. The testers, they were under an NDA, but that effectively ended when one journalist said that he didn't sign any NDA, which is technically true, I'm sure, but legally false. He just ignored the old "don't tell anyone about this" message when he booted the game. So in August of 2024, seemingly in response to that, the Valve lifted the NDA and said, you can tell people, invite as many people as you want, and they described Deadlock as being in early development, but made it clear they were listening to feedback and will continue that rapid development. And for the first time, Valve actually acknowledged the fact the game even existed publicly. And since that acknowledgement, we've seen momentum. Bi-weekly patches rolled in, ranging from small balance tweaks to full system overhauls. And that continued until December, when Valve slowed the patch cadence, saying that they were focusing on deeper development and making sure that they developed impactful patches that moved the game forward. And then in February of 2025, we got a big one, a map overhaul that cemented in the 3-lane structure. Beyond a layout change, I believe it reflects a commitment to the core gameplay identity. And I really encourage you to check out my patch reaction video to hear more about that, and how I was kind of wrong about Deadlock in 4 lanes and how I thought that was really essential. But since then, the patches have been more tighter, surgical, and clearly aimed at refining this 3-lane structure. And you could argue that that means that they still have work to do, but I think it's much more realistic for them to tweak balance post-launch once they have even more data and even more players. I don't think it's that realistic to restructure the game's map or combat loops once the game releases. That has to be settled ahead of time. I don't know, I certainly would. Wouldn't you be annoyed if the balance was awesome but there was no mid-boss? And then they change the mid-boss and it messes with the balance, and they add one in, or they add in a bunch of things and it keeps messing with the balance. No, let's add in all this stuff now, and we can figure out the balance once there are a gazillion people coming in, and we can give exponentially more data to the developers. And as the closed playtest community gets more public-facing through YouTube content, esports, discussions just on Reddit, all these communities are slowly growing. Valve has pretty slowly shifted their messaging from very private to a much more you know where to find us, wink wink kind of attitude. This is a huge distinction and a common path that Valve games have taken before. The biggest example of this for Deadlock is that the patch notes are now being published on the Steam page since late October instead of only being linked in Discord. And this puts us firmly in the pre-launch refinement. And this might be a refinement period that lasts another 6 months, but when you go over how long this game now has been in development, that certainly feels like we're on the runway. We're not in early development. We're figuring out if we need a Phillips or a flathead to screw in these touches. And more importantly, we're seeing Valve engage in a way that suggests that they're getting ready. And now I think that there is one giant elephant in the room, and it is GTA 6, which may be surprising to hear me mention, because even though GTA 6 isn't launching on PC, its impact will be massive, and it's going to absolutely be the biggest video game release of all time, if not one of the biggest media releases of all time. Every major gaming company is going to be avoiding that blast radius, and I'm sure Valve is factoring that in. If Deadlock were to launch right before GTA 6, especially in fall, where it's looking like GTA 6 could release, they're going to shift. And if Valve does choose to release in the similar window to GTA 6, I imagine it'll be because they want to capitalize on the fact that it's not releasing on PC immediately. And I think that's a huge risk. Even I am going to convince my roommates to split one of those godforsaken shitbox consoles so that we can play ASAP. And I'm positive that there are other diehard PC gamers in the same boat. And so even if Deadlock is ready, Valve might pause just to preserve the spotlight, because I don't think there's any good reason to release during a media hurricane, and I hope that they agree with me. More eyes, more clicks, more players, because I think this game can be monumental as well and deserves its own spotlight, and not to share it with a once-in-a-decade behemoth. And so what else can we look at before we break it down? For one, Valve hasn't launched any official Deadlock social media yet, but that's pretty normal. They didn't with Half-Life Alyx until months before launch, and they're not the kind of studio that really builds up months of marketing hype. They drop when ready or often suddenly, like they did for CS2. And while there's no official social media, we do have the Steam patch notes, not only Discord-only dev updates. So it's public-facing communication, and that's a major shift. Once Valve starts talking to the Steam audience, they're going beyond the current testers. And there's also now the continued appearance of Deadlock content on major platforms. Third-party websites are cataloging stats, pro players stream gameplay regularly, and YouTubers are building recurring content around patch analysis and strategy. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Blast TV just this week added a section about Deadlock to their page, to their website rather. And one other thought though, that I doubt the game is going to be released before the holiday season. Although games do often release in that window, they're often story-driven or single-player games, and not games that are going to rely on a live service adjacent model like Deadlock is. The launch is hugely important for any game, but especially live service, and I'm sure the developers are going to want to be ready and able to make big changes, or not big changes, make changes, fix bugs, etc. in the weeks after launch, and that's kind of an idea that conflicts with the holiday spirit. And so let's tally up our scorecard. Valve usually launches within 4 to 8 months of public confirmation, and Deadlock's acknowledgement came in on August of 2024, which is almost 8 months ago. The patch cadence slowed dramatically in December, and the foundational features like a 3-lane map are getting final looks and adjustments, if not locked in entirely. And the public Steam patch notes are active, and that's when they have like the big patches, the ones that they actually want to show off. Not, sprint speed buff by half a meter. And so, guys, if GTA 6 doesn't interfere, I think we will see Deadlock in fall of 2025. Probably get an open beta first and then a full launch, but the important part, again, is unrestricted access and Valve giving some marketing to the game. I'm sure that will come in the form of a giant splash screen of the Steam homepage banner. And if GTA 6 does dominate that window, I think Valve does delay until early 2025, which lets the noise die down and gives Deadlock room to breathe. It's not some far off project anymore, guys. It's real, it's moving, and it is getting closer by the day to release. I can't wait till this game does finally come out. And so that's my theory, guys, but I want to hear yours. When do you think Deadlock is coming out? Drop a comment down in the time capsule of the comment section down below, and I'll come back here, and whoever's got like real close guess, I'll definitely reply back to you to remind you, because I think it'll be a super fun, just little time capsule to do. And so if you want to stay in tune with all the latest Deadlock news, all the launch details, patches, leaks, etc. leading up to the launch and beyond, make sure you subscribe so that you can see Deadlock Weekly every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern. So, guys, I hope you have a fantastic Friday and Saturday. Finish the week strong, and I will see you again on Sunday for Deadlock Weekly. Peace!